the other thing that I like to tell people too is if you just join a Chamber of Commerce by filling out the application, sending in your check, and just having your name on the website, congratulations, you've wasted that investment.
Right.
But if you're there, you're talking to people, you're networking, you're being genuine, and you do it regularly, good things will happen because those connections get made. People get to know you. People get to look forward to interacting with you. And, it might not be that one particular your biggest thing that you're looking to sell.
Yeah.
But people are going to remember you and they're going to come to you when that right time happens.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the show where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place. My name is Andy DeMeo, and today I'm coming to you from Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. My guest today is Nate Hastings, who is Vice President at the Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth, and we talk about how the Chamber Collaborative facilitates connection and networking for local business and the wider community. We talk about the Regional Alliance of Chambers in the Greater Seacoast and what they learn from each other, and maybe how they resemble the five families from The Godfather. We talk about catapults and trebuchets and how to effectively lay siege to your enemies, but mostly why, as a local business, you should consider joining the Chamber and how it may benefit you. All that and a bunch of other stuff on this episode of Granite Goodness. I hope you enjoy it. Nate Hastings.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to Granite Goodness.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I've wanted to talk to you for a long time, and now we're here.
I'm pumped to be here.
I met you at UNH. I don't remember exactly when, but it feels like ancient history. This is my conception of like you and what you're doing here.
Okay.
I was on this like student committee, the Student Activity Fee Committee, SAFC.
Yes.
And, I feel you were involved with that. I remember you being very involved in the MUB, like kind of the central hub building, the Memorial Union building on campus. And you just seemed like, again, the particulars are lost in me, but I remember you as being someone who was like very well liked and had involvement in a lot of different things around campus that were just like building community. And anytime your name would come up in a conversation, it'd be like, oh, Nate Hastings, love that guy. He's great. We're so lucky to have him, and then I, graduated and did other things. And then, this show came around, and then I saw, he's at the Chamber of Commerce now.
Yeah.
That's a perfect look at that. And then I noticed that the Chamber's doing their own podcast about like cool businesses in the sequester, and I was like, I gotta have Nate on.
I appreciate it. Similarly, I saw, I'm not sure if it was the first episode, if it was Ian's, or maybe it was
Ian was number one. Yeah.
But like I saw this come across my radar, and I kind of went, I think you really went, these are some familiar names. I got to find out who's behind this. And so I think I kind of like liked it or followed it. Yeah. And I think you beat me to the punch. You dropped me a note. And I, speaking of like, vague conceptions, like, all right, I know it was SAFC.
Right.
And then I did have to struggle. I was like, what org was it? And so eventually we got it together. But it makes me feel better that you were also like, yes, I have a memory. It's a little fuzzy, but it's positive. So we're coming in the same spot.
There's an association here. It's like, I haven't seen you. That would have been like,
like what years were you there? Yeah.
2014 to 2018. I would have been on the committee in like 2015-ish.
Okay, that sounds 14. Right. So, you were on the committee, and that was a little bit before my twins were born. And so that all tracks.
Right on.
Wild.
So, how long have you been at the Chamber now?
3 years. Yeah. I was at UNH for a very long time. My UNH story goes, I was a student there, didn't know what to do my senior year, so I just stayed for more school.
Well, let's stop you there.
Yeah.
We're going to go back even further.
Oh, sure.
Because what I always like to begin with, like, this is Granite Goodness.
Oh, right.
Tell me about your relationship to New Hampshire.
I certainly can. That's right. Sorry for jumping the gun.
No. I mean, you're perfect. You're perfect.
Yeah, I am from New Hampshire. I was born in Peterborough, New Hampshire.
Peterborough.
Yeah, I was actually there this weekend randomly.
Kidding.
Yeah. I was born in Monadnock Community Hospital. My mom's family goes back generations in Wilton, New Hampshire, and by generations I mean as long as white people have been there.
Yeah. Long time.
I grew up on Kimball Hill. Kimball is a family name.
Right.
And my grandfather, all goes well, will be celebrating his 100th birthday in January, and he's still up there. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
And then my dad's family was in Mason, New Hampshire, and so I was there. Went to high school, WLC, Wilton Limeboro. Then came out to UNH. And yeah, I was a New Hampshire person. The only time I've ever lived somewhere else was I had a semester abroad in London.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I came out to the Seacoast. I had a brief 1 year away from the Seacoast after grad school before I came back to UNH to work professionally.
Yeah.
So I was at UNH 5.5 years running the Woodside Apartments at UNH, and then started at the MUB in 2012 doing all that fun stuff with Dave Zemansky, Marianne Lusgraf.
Oh, I remember Dave.
Yeah, those folks. And yeah, so then around that time, when I moved off campus, my wife and I got an apartment in Dover, and then about a year and change after that, we were fortunate enough to buy the house that we're in now.
Right on.
And so, so I've been in Dover a long time, and, there's I was ready to take the next step a couple of times. The first time I didn't was around the time I was mentioning when the boys were born. It didn't seem like the right time to switch jobs. And then I was really looking to do something different in 2019, and then everybody in the world was doing something different.
Right.
And kind of coming out of that, it was definitely time to do something else. And the Chamber was the first time in my experience interviewing where, coming out of higher ed, you almost always have to stretch a little bit to talk about what you have done and how that's relevant to the other jobs.
Right. I'm sorry, this fly is here.
No, it's all right. It's a fly. It's all good. But I remember still interviewing with our president, Ben, and he said, a day in the life of the Chamber, there's no day that's the same. And I'm like, check, got that. And he goes, you might start the day with bankers in business suits that want the firm handshake.
Right.
You're going to have lunch with maybe a nonprofit, and they might want to hug you at the end of the meeting. And then if you're lucky, you're going to end the day out at one of the breweries, and the brewer might want to give you a fist bump at a pint.
Right.
You have any experience with days like that? And I was like, man, every day.
Yeah.
Student Senate policy meetings to meeting with the environmental groups.
Yeah.
To programming. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And it was just great. So I've been there for 3 years now.
What do you know now that you would, if you could talk to yourself on day one of your job at the Chamber, what would you say to Nate in the beginning?
I don't know that I've got a lot to say to that Nate, but the Nate that I have words for.
Yeah, tell us about that, Nate.
is earlier in my professional career. So I do remember people talking about networking.
Yeah.
And I rolled my eyes pretty hard, like many people do.
Yeah.
And now I'm one of those people that talks about networking. But because I came up in a very regimented, prescribed, state-run higher ed situation, hiring is exceptionally prescribed, compensation is exceptionally prescribed, promotion is and it has to be. I understand, but so that was my framing, my experience. And now I've sort of seen how so much is fluid. So many people move from place to place to place. And I have a lot of these great interactions where I run into somebody from years before. And thankfully, for the most part, they are positive. However, there were times, I did a lot of student conduct work. So sometimes when I did you work at UNH?
Right.
I have to be like, was our interaction positive?
Right.
And usually, thankfully, it mostly is. But there were times where I focused too much on the job I was doing at that time, and I should have focused more on the relationships with people I might have been in a disagreement with.
Sure.
And I remind myself of that more, a lot now. I've got some great mentors here that I work with, and I can really only report one kind of incident where that old gear slipped back in.
Yeah.
But I think it's more that. I definitely now see the importance of getting to know people, relating to people.
Right.
And I like to feel like I was always real with people, but I think sort of setting aside problems and viewing them less as a confrontational battle. I would have liked to have done less of that at earlier stages of my career.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of inversely, maybe we had a huge argument in a committee meeting. I don't remember. But like, I only have a vague but very positive
I appreciate that
memory of you. And so maybe I think that's like the 99.1% split of folks who.
And I don't think there was that many that were that bad. And I've definitely, and it was more staff to staff. It was never with students, or at least I'd like to think it wasn't. So no, that is the thing though. I think I would have gotten more on the networking thing earlier.
Yeah.
Other fun aside was Catapult Seacoast, the Young Professionals Network in the region.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they got started when I was a young professional. And I remember my wife, we weren't married yet at the time, but she says, she shoots me a note during the day. She's like, "Hey, do you want to go to the Catapult event in the MUB?" I was like, "Hell yeah, I do." And she's like, "Really? I thought this would be a hard sell." And I was like, "Catapults in the MUB? What more can you want?" I had visions of in Union Court, like little mini trebuchets.
Yeah. Oh,
and she's like, "Oh no." Like, no. Catapult is this networking organization. And I was like, "No, absolutely not. I don't want to do it." Funny thing
Imagine if they brought a Catapult.
Totally,
though.
right?
Yeah.
I've recommended this idea several times. I still have in my office this little metal Catapult toy that my wife gave me as a sort of inside joke that Christmas about that story.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a position where I work with the folks who are running Catapult on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And I have told them the story, full disclosure. Yeah.
Man, that would be a good, whatever their budget is, you got to find a way for the trebuchet line item, or I guess it has to be the people who are like siege fanatics or whatever. Like there's a robust argument about how superior the trebuchet is to the Catapult.
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
Yeah,
yes.
I think there's whole communities about this.
I mean, yes, and I've seen some. I remember watching some programs on like pumpkin chunkin and like the different kinds of.
Right.
Yes, I think we should get into that.
Well, or you could start another organization called Trebuchet Seacoast. It's like, you think Catapult Seacoast is going to help your career and be to network other young professionals? Forget that. Trebuchet Seacoast, we're going to Jupiter. We're going even further.
I love it.
This is the pitch. Man, so could you explain a little bit, like, what is a Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah.
Like, what even is that?
Sure. And, I'll be honest, other than driving by them, I live near the one in Dover, and, most communities have one or have one nearby.
You drive by the building when you go through the downtown.
Like, what even is that? And occasionally you see some representations in movies, and that still doesn't tell you very much. So I first got to learn about them when I was doing a program called Leadership Seacoast, which exposes folks in the region to all the challenges. And in the region, it's kind of they liken the experience to drinking from the fire hose.
Right.
And there were some people in my class that worked for chambers, and then through that, I actually had my first interview for potentially working at one. Mm-hmm. But in our orientations, I always say to our new members, at its most boring and basic, a Chamber of Commerce is a membership-driven trade organization.
Okay.
And I said, and if you're still with me, I'd like to tell you more about it and why
I'm
that's
with you.
good. Yeah.
We're with you.
So essentially, a chamber exists to advocate for the business community, especially for their members.
Yeah.
We like to take the view here that, while like the business community is broad and we are here for our members pay for that privilege, our members volunteer, our members do a lot with us.
Yeah.
But through that rising tide does raise a lot of ships. So, where possible, we want the good things that we're doing to benefit the entire business community.
Yeah.
So that's an important part. Every chamber is a little different. There are 6 chambers in the Seacoast region because New England.
Right.
And I don't feel like I need to say much more than that on a podcast about New Hampshire.
You get it or you don't.
Yeah. So honestly, north to south, east to west, Greater Rochester, the Falls, which is Somersworth and Rollinsford, plus the Berwicks of Maine.
Wait, Rollinsford has their own?
No, so Rollinsford and Somersworth are the New Hampshire side of the Falls Chamber, and then the Berwicks in Maine.
I see.
Yep. That one's called the Falls. And then Greater Dover, us here in Portsmouth, Hampton Area Chamber, and Exeter Area Chamber. But
It's
everyone's
like the 5 mafia families from The Godfather. That's
so the 6 chambers. When the presidents get together, we do call it the Seacoast Chamber Alliance.
Oh,
so
my
it's almost
God.
like this Captain Planet
Yeah.
sort of thing. So we stay in touch because we're a small state.
Right.
What impacts one community impacts another. We are in this situation where there are multiple towns, and we even straddle counties.
Yeah.
But the impacts go across. But every chamber is a little different. So we are similar to Hampton in the sense that we both have a large tourism component. We do some community things, but not as much as Exeter and Dover do, because they, for example, Apple Harvest Day in Dover is a chamber-run thing, and they do an awesome job at it.
Yeah.
We are blessed that here in Portsmouth there is Pro Portsmouth that does Market Square Day.
Right.
So we can support those member nonprofits. We do everything from networking events where business people can meet each other, job seekers or people looking to do business with other folks. We do the tourism side of things. There's also public policy work. So, for example, yesterday we got both candidates for the first congressional district together.
Oh, right on.
Not together in a room, let's debate sling mud kind of way. The method that we do it is candidate A comes in, talks for a few minutes, and then more importantly takes questions.
Yeah.
They leave, candidate B comes in.
Yeah.
We like to provide that opportunity for our members to connect with our elected leaders or potential elected leaders, so that the first time they need to reach out, pro or con, of any kind of legislation, it's not the first time that they've interacted with these folks.
Yeah.
And then, we occasionally get to do fun things too. But, a chamber is very much almost like a student union in some ways, but for the business community.
Yeah. Well, I like that very much because it's not so different. Another guest I had on here, James, the executive director of the New Hampshire Business Finance Authority, right? They help get, capital and credit access to entrepreneurs everywhere. And, I like talking to him because it was like so many people, I think particularly young people, they have this, not weird, but, and I get why they feel this way, but a conception of the private sector, which is a huge, you might as well describe planet Earth, right? Like it's not a monolith. But, they're very cynical about it, or particularly when it involves the word corporate anything. And it's like, oh, the idea of a business or a corporation or anything that's like for profit, it's like they have all this baggage with it. And I get that. I think a lot of people do, and there's rational reasons for that. But, his work and talking to him was like, oh, there's a lot about this it's very humanoid. Like it's actually just a bunch of people, and I feel like that's exactly what you're saying. Like this is just there's no such thing. A business is not a living, like the company doesn't exist. It's the people there, right?
Yep, there's definitely a lot of that, and I had a really good, profound thought that I've already lost, but
it'll come back.
I'm sure it will. But it is a lot of that. It's those relationships. It's getting the folks together. I know where it was going. So our name, we do business as the Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth, and that goes back to our organization's centennial in 2017. They wanted to shed some of that baggage, that image that some people may have of a chamber of commerce being a place just for a bunch of old white businessmen in smoking jackets. The smoking jackets kind of appeal to me. That's a neat aesthetic. But I mean, that idea that it is
we can give smoking jackets to everybody.
I mean, that could be fun. Exactly. Yeah. Anyone. But the idea being we are here for people to collaborate. Is where that came from. It does give us one of the longest URLs ever, like nate@portsmouthcollaborative.org.
Right.
Is a pretty long title, but that's important to us. And an exciting thing, another New Hampshire thing is bringing it back to Peterborough. The Greater Keene and Peterborough Chamber is now.
People are going to know if you get it wrong.
I know they. Oh, absolutely. It's like saying Piscataqua wrong. But the Greater Keene and Peterborough Chamber rebranded as the Monadnock Collaborative.
Oh, right on.
So one more, and we've got a theme going, I think. But it's the same idea, and I think you'll see a lot of chambers agreeing that it's about the relationships and it's about the people that make up all these businesses.
Yeah. To that end, what, like you mentioned the bifurcation, I don't know if bifurcation means two or not, but kind of like the segmentation of, all right, in this relatively little area, we have 6 or whatever different chambers of commerce, right? And I'm sure that, there's other like analogs for municipal areas where like for a comparable population or kind of area, there might be one, right?
Yes, absolutely.
What do you think are like the advantages? Like, do you ever think about it of like, man, what if the whole greater Seacoast area was just the chamber of commerce for all of this, as opposed to like the 6 smaller ones? Like, what works well about that?
I mean, well, part of it is when you're working with a smaller group, you can't help but get to know them on an even better level. I also think a lot of it goes back to where we are in the country. I'm still only 3 years into this particular industry, so I don't know it as well as I knew some others. But, for example, in parts of the South or maybe Midwest, you may have county chambers of commerce.
Right.
But also in those places, the county is a more robust governmental organization than it is here in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, when you think about the county, you're thinking of corrections facilities, nursing homes,
courts,
some administration. But that is not the primary governmental organization that a lot of us interact with. But I think if it were, then maybe you would see a different thing here. One of the things that I think is good, though, is a lot of these smaller chambers, we're doing more things together. So, for example, this past July was our 3rd, I think, time where the Hampton, Exeter, and Portsmouth chambers did their after hours together. And so, that one, we still had nearly 200 people in a 98-degree day under a tent at Grill 28 at Pease Golf Course. There's definitely appetites for it. So, and it wasn't even planned to do it this way, but we're getting together again for December. Us and the Dover Chamber are planning our mixer together for February. Because there are, some of the larger businesses are members of some, all 6, and some pick and choose depending. So, if there is a branch of a bank in one of those regions, they're most likely a member there. And we even have smaller members who are members of multiple chambers. I think, for example, Coastal MyBox are members with us here in Portsmouth as well as Hampton and Dover. It all makes sense to the different businesses. People ask me, all right, well, I live in this one place, I do business here, which chamber should I join? I tell them, try them out, meet them, engage, see what makes the most sense. But we are happy to welcome folks who live here or do business here or some way that it makes sense. We want to have an open door, which the fun thing is I didn't really know this before I started, but Portsmouth's motto is the city of the open door.
That's right.
Actually, I saw that you had Mayor McEachern in here. Did he show you a doorstop?
Oh my God. So I didn't even get this. It's similar. I'll make you feel, less not unknowledgeable. So he gave me I'm going to spoil the story. You're going to figure out what I was thinking.
Sure.
I interviewed him. He was great, super nice guy. And he gave me the small wooden block with, that would like Woodburn Portsmouth. And I was like, oh, that's cute. Like he's got a whole drawer full of them. This is a nice memento. And it's on my desk at work in my office. And it's a cute city of Portsmouth thing. And then my coworker comes by one day and he's like, oh, that's kind of funny. It's a doorstop that says City of the Open Door on it. And I was like, what do you, that's a doorstop? I thought it was just a well-crafted triangular prism of wood that had been wood burned on it. So I didn't even realize. Like you didn't know the motto. I didn't know that the thing was a literal doorstop. I didn't. It missed me.
And what's great and awesome, at least at our events, he gives the chamber credit for that because actually it was somewhere early on in the chamber's time, somewhere in like maybe the 1919 or in the 20s, there's a pamphlet and then there's copies of it at the Portsmouth Athenaeum promoting Portsmouth as the city of the open door. So it's pretty cool.
And I wonder too, I bet they had it inscribed at the Makerspace or somewhere.
I bet. And that's a great place. They actually, fun fact, they sharpen our large ribbon cutting scissors.
That's such a specific relationship to have.
Well, I mean, they do other
don't
things.
Say.
They're members with us as well, and they do other things. But that's kind of
I've got a trunk full of large ribbon cutting scissors right now.
Why?
I just carry them everywhere. I can't find anyone to sharpen them everywhere I go.
Well, right over there, a little further into the West End, they'll take care of you.
I have dozens of pairs of large ribbon cutting scissors. I don't know what to do with them. And they could build you a catapult too.
They certainly could. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Dude, Alex is the guy, right? He's redhead.
Yeah, I believe so. Jen on our staff is actually on the board there. So right I actually haven't been there in about a year or two. I should go back.
They're doing all kinds of, I think they brought someone on to do like more social stuff.
Yes.
Because they do all this incredible stuff. And then they started posting like, I'm a maker, and this really high quality content, which is not, because like what I like about organizations like them, and my wife Jess used to, when we lived here in the Seacoast area, she taught a little class. I don't think it was the sharpening of large ribbon cutting scissors, but it was something to do with like seamstressy or I think we'd make it mending night. It was mending night.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It was tons of fun. So I got to go and hang out there a little bit and sew some stuff badly, and meet some of the folks, including Alex. And I like organizations like that they do incredible work. Like not of say the whole footprint of what they do is like 100%. It's like they do the 95% of like actually what we do here, we do well. Like we provide a lot of programming. We have an affordable, accessible space to like let people do complex projects of anything you can imagine. And then like the other 5% of like, all right, but are we showing it off?
Oh, sure.
Like
right.
I like orgs like that, where it's like you actually do all this incredible stuff, but you could do a better job, showing it off, and the people who, this is the people who I like to kind of have on the show who like, I know are doing really great stuff, but who maybe are not naturally the sort of people who are like, me, put me in the spotlight. Right. Mm-hmm. And they're often the people who are like doing the most interesting stuff.
Absolutely.
As opposed to the attention-seeking people.
We're fortunate enough that we also have a very large nonprofit community within our membership.
Yeah.
And there are some that have people that are out there that are telling the good word, like they need to.
Yeah.
And there are times where we get to help be that group or be part of that strategy at least, which is awesome and really rewarding.
Yeah. Well, you tell me, you guys did a little podcast.
Yeah.
Right? Tell us about that.
So the Chamber has had a couple of podcast attempts pre-pandemic. Jen and Ben were the hosts, or at least for one of those instances.
That's a great... I'm sure that's on purpose.
Yeah.
Today it's Ben, Jen.
That's right. And there was even there was a radio show at one point, I was later told. And it's one of those projects that I'm sure you can relate to, that like eventually the work, if you get off the horse or get off the routine of doing it, it's hard to get back onto it. Yeah. And so it never really worked out. But part of my background before I came to the Chamber was I was been active with a lot of music and photography and arts and things like that. And so I was going through, we have a document called the Collaboration Guide where it talks about all the things that we do in a fiscal year.
Yeah.
A big part of that is for sponsorship opportunities, but also it's to show people what to get involved in. So I found that they had a podcast at one point, and we kept it on the books. And we're like, well, if we get a sponsor, then we'll look into it. And if not, we're not sure. And as we were gearing up for this current fiscal year, I was seeing, podcasts creeping up. Like this was one of them. This is around that time. I was already seeing some, and I was going, I think the time may be right. And I think if we plan this right, we should just get going on it. And if we find a sponsor, that'll be great. Right. But I think it's time to do it. And so the main shift for us was looking at our very, very busy schedule and figuring out when can we batch record to then strategically release where it will be sustainable and we won't hurt ourselves with too much work. And that's where we've been. So we did 3 pilot episodes in the summer. We are halfway through our first season and about to start planning recording season 2.
Right on.
The idea with it really being talk to interesting people within the membership.
Yeah.
We are very well suited to help show off members that have some kind of physical space. We can get people into a space like this for a mixer event. If a member is not tied to a space, it can be a little more challenging. It's not impossible. You just have to think about it a little bit more. Whether those are people whose businesses is entirely remote, or it could be any one of a number of reasons.
Right.
It can be harder. Or if it's a place that's a secure manufacturing facility and visitors are not a good idea for legit reasons. And so that was another idea of, we can get the word about these great members out to, one, a different kind of population, and two, we can get word about folks that we usually can't out there.
Yeah.
So that's been how we've gotten started with it. And of course, pretty quickly, we've had people go, oh, I would love to be on your podcast.
That's right.
Which I'm sure you get too.
They come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, and you're like, I would love to. I did kind of plan this out for the last next year, but it's been a lot of fun. So I produce it. Ben, our president, hosts it, and it's been a lot of fun. We've actually, Podbean congratulated me on posting the 10th episode today.
Right on.
Yeah,
Podbean's great.
Yeah, it's been really good.
Yeah, I used them for my first 10, and then when I, another thing that's part of Granite Goodness is the newsletter, the Good News New Hampshire newsletter, and Substack ended up being like it's really, I don't know how they make money. I'm sure they do somehow, but like they host your stuff for free. Like they transcribe. No one's paying me to say this. I'm a legit convert.
Yeah.
Like I can have all this stuff for free, like an easy newsletter, and it posts it. It's just like, and they do the podcast thing too. So it just made sense. How you doing? We're actually closed. Sorry. Apologize. I should go lock that.
I saw him walking up and I went, oh no, he's about to go in. I wonder if that door is locked.
That's the fun of it, though. I mean, why wouldn't you want to come in here?
Well, and also the softbox here shows up very well. Yeah. I knew you were ready when I was parking.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, it's fun. This is a live recording environment. We're out here in the world. But yeah, no, Podbean made it very, very easy, and then I ended up switching hosts for another reason. But
sure.
But yeah, it's funny to hear the story. Like, do you know Troy Farkas? Have you met that guy?
No.
So there's another podcast called Seacoast Stories. Get this.
I do know that name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He is like a professional podcaster. Like he works for Spotify. So this is like his whole life. And he like moved here through some like accidental circumstance, and then like just really fell in love with the area.
Yeah.
And was like, I have these storytelling skills. I meet all these interesting people. Like there's so many cool human-oriented stories to tell about this region.
Yeah.
So he focuses on like seacoast of Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and it's all just like human interest. He had Vernon Family Farm came on the other day. Like that was a really great episode. And he's just the nicest guy in the world. Eventually, I'm going to go on. He's going to come on me. But like, I love. It's like again, we're all doing very different things, but like the seed of like, there's all these really great stories to tell, around the Granite State and in this area. And it makes me very happy and validated when it's like, oh, someone else sees it too.
Yeah.
And they're like, whoa, there's a lot of great stuff.
We even had this idea when Ben and I were planning this. We even almost went in a completely different direction at one point, because there's some fun things where there's people that them because of their business and what they do, but they might have another completely random side to them that only some people know about.
Catapult enthusiast.
Right, yeah, exactly. That the community.
It could be anybody.
It could be. One idea was we joked that there is a scooter gang at City Hall.
Yeah.
It's the assistant city manager and the city manager, and a lot of them just happen to have scooters as a good way to get around. But not a lot of people know that. And occasionally they're like, did I just see so-and-so? Like, yeah, that's not that, they do that. So we're like, okay, we could talk to them. And, we've got Julie Cutting from Cure Restaurant. Her and her husband, they're both chefs. They have another business that's probably about 2 years old now. They're in the cannabis business over across the river in Maine, in the edible spaces.
Yeah.
That some people know very much about and other people have no idea. And so we're like, maybe we'll just talk about the other things that people do.
Yeah.
And we've just decided to keep it free flowing and see where it goes.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to talk about around here.
Oh, there's so is. And I kind of think too, this is, again, Troy would have an interesting opinion on this, given that he's like a professional, but my kind of pet theory for some of the stuff is like, everyone knows what it feels like now to be overwhelmed by like just the sheer amount of information, you know.
Sure.
And there's lots of good, like this is what I think is, you know, kind of, you know, beautiful but also hard of like, you know, so much of the creative technology has democratized, like anyone can make anything, you know, like you can make a movie now for a 10th the amount of money.
Sure.
Or whatever, or even like this podcast is a good example. Like the computer will transcribe it for me.
Yep.
You know, I can have a better camera that's much cheaper. Like the technology is like really, really helpful to a lot of creatives, and whatever your interests are, whatever you're fascinated by, like there's probably a TV show about it. People are right, like, which is a really cool thing.
Yeah.
But the downside is like, you know, what's lost there is everyone having some common cultural, like, you know, like I like to talk to people about Seinfeld.
Oh, sure.
Because generationally to me, like it feels like one of the last everyone watched Seinfeld.
Sure.
you
Yes.
know?
Yeah. That shared experience.
Right.
Yep.
SpongeBob a little bit too, but when I meet young people who didn't watch SpongeBob, I'm like, how did you not watch SpongeBob SquarePants? But everyone feels that way about something else. But I don't know. I kind of think that, you know, this is a reason why people are taking more of an interest in like kind of local content
sure.
about stuff. And it's definitely what I'm interested in, you know, like Granite Goodness for me is, you know, I loved all these people who, you know, were talking about, hey, what's going well instead of everything going wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
Love that idea. Tons of people doing it with their purview being the whole world or the whole country. And I was like, who's doing this for New Hampshire? Nobody.
There you go.
Great.
Yeah.
Wow. There's so many great stories to tell, you know, and like, and that's what I'm interested in. Right. But so it's there's like pros and cons to everything. Like there's content. You can find a community for everything.
Yes.
For large ribbon cutting, scissors sharpening,
That's
you know,
right.
for catapult building, you know.
Yep. Sure.
But it's all about this I think is a good reason for having a functional, healthy chamber of commerce.
I mean,
it's a common space. You know?
No, it is, and it does get a chance too. There's a whole lot of those. Some people are just professional connectors. Like we have a group of volunteers within the chamber that are called chamber ambassadors. I can't do my job without them. They are true kind of like force multipliers, if you want to use an expression like that. But they, you know, for logistically for events, they're kind of our first call for volunteers. They do the check-in at our business after hours. They lead some of the networking events. And they also help with member onboarding and recruitment and retention. You know, they're out there talking, and, you know, if they're talking to a new person who might be overwhelmed with a networking experience of 150 people, they're great at going, well, who do you need to meet? What kind of people are a win for you? And they can scan around the room and go, yeah, okay, I've got somebody for you over here. And then at the same time, they've got this mental Rolodex of, I know exactly who they need to talk to. They're not here, so I'm going to put them together on a warm intro later. Yeah. Some people are just professional connectors like that. Yeah. And it's fun.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I believe that's the origin of the word nomenclature.
Is it?
Yeah, this was a job they were probably a slave or something, but you know, in like the Roman Republic and whatnot, you know, important people like senators and all that, they would have someone in their entourage with them whose job it was to remember, you know, the names and, you know, relationships of all the people. So they'd whisper in the ear and be like, that's Sextus Antonius.
Well, yeah, you see that on things like the West Wing, like, you know, going down the reception line.
That's right.
You know, this is the Prime Minister of Indonesia or yes. It's handy.
It is handy.
I have a real weakness, like a struggle I have with my job is I am not awesome with names. But I will remember things about people that I have interacted with. So, for example, like I knew when we were reconnecting, I knew it was SAFSI.
Yeah.
I knew in general what the experience was, but putting the exact name of the organization was tough. Thankfully, there's been times where I've been meeting somebody for sometimes even the second or third time. Yeah. I'm like, I'm really sorry, but I know that you told me this cool story about, and I'll like recite it back to them, and they're like, whoa. It's like, so you forgive me on the name thing, right? Like but it's the struggle. So if I could get somebody to whisper like that, that would be great.
That'd be a great Someone would love to do that. I would love to do that. It's actually funny you mentioned that. I had someone from New Hampshire Audubon on the show the other day. Her name is Willa Karoka, and she was explaining to me. She's an environmental educator, right? Okay. So she spent a lot of time talking to kids and the public about like, hey, what's interesting about nature? And like, what do you find interesting about nature and the outdoors? And I was explaining to her, like, I just can't make any sense of, plants, which I know sounds dumb. Like I really struggle to tell them apart. I'm confused by like, no, this one has a bud that looks like that, or the branches go in this direction. Like it's like another language to me.
Sure.
And someone like Willa, she knows. She says, no, you're thinking about it wrong. She's like, I know the Latin names for these plants, right? The technical name or whatever. But before that, the first thing I understood or how I got to know them was like, who were they? What did they do? Like, why were they in that spot? Why did they look that way? What was their relationship to other parts of the ecological web? Okay. And so she was like, it's not that different. Like, some people are really good at remembering names, but a lot of people, most people I think aren't good at it. They're not a little computer person. They can remember it perfectly. So I think it's similar. There's an analog there between like the networks of nature and people of like, you may not be perfect at remembering, again, like the technical, someone's full legal name or whatever, but you remember, you remember the relationship with them, right? Yeah. And then once you have kind of the story of like, oh, like when you're describing someone to someone else, you're never like, do you know Nate Hastings? Oh, maybe not. Do you know this cool musician guy who used to be at UNH and does the chamber? Oh yeah, I know that guy. Yeah, sure. Yep. He's a catapult fanatic. He's crazy. Like that's all. Or like, oh, the dude in the yellow shirt. Who is that? Like that's how we describe people. Yeah. And so that made me feel better when she told me. She was like, no, this is how we understand nature. You learn the names later. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, great. I like that.
So it's, I don't know. It's all a network.
I like it.
It's all a network.
That's awesome.
Tell me, Nate.
Yeah.
What is like the history and kind of the future of a Chamber of Commerce? Like, why does this organization exist? You shared a little bit about it's kind of like an evolution of a trade organization, but like, what did they look like in the past, and what do you feel like is the future? What's the latest and greatest, and like, what do people do in Chambers of Commerce?
Yeah, that's a cool question. So there's some cool black and white photos. I think the Portsmouth group was originally like the Mechanic and Trade Organization or something like that. They all had very long beards, things like that. Looked like 1800s presidents.
Right.
So
I tell them apart.
There wasn't any names written on them, but so I don't know what they looked like originally. I do think that whole getting to know people has always been some kind of part of it. Mm-hmm. I think the future is, I think the important thing in the future is reaching out. I joined the chamber at an interesting time. I joined in July of 2021, so things were reopening.
Right.
A thing that was very interesting was I wasn't alone in being new to the chamber in my first several months, because as things were opening back up, there was a lot of people who have lived here for a decade, some less, some longer, but people who had been here for a while. They had some friends, but their lives were elsewhere. They traveled X amount of times a week or month.
Yeah.
Their business contacts were away. They were somewhere else, and being forced to be here made them realize they didn't know a lot of things about their own communities. Right. So that was an interesting thing. So we had people trying out a chamber for the very first time, some for social reasons, some for business long-term reasons, and some for the traditional reasons. So that was interesting. I thought that was a helpful way to get started. The other thing is, maybe I latched onto the rebranding and wanting to show a more we're for everybody kind of vibe, but I kind of look around and I've stayed in touch with some former students better than others, and I knew some folks that I knew from SAFC that are out in their careers places, and a couple of them I would see in photos from our golf tournament from the year before I joined, and I was like, okay, but I'm like, I know there's a whole bunch of top-notch new professionals out there.
Yeah.
That I think they would benefit a lot from being involved with this group, but I'm not seeing them. And then I got to thinking more, because, at higher ed, there's fewer and fewer students of traditional college age. Right. There's also less pressure to do the 4-year degree. There's a whole bunch of reasons why higher ed is a scary place long-term by the math.
Right.
So still having that in my mind, I went, oh no, are we next?
Yeah.
So I not only did I want to be part of rebuilding the membership of this organization, because the Portsmouth Chamber, we always have a talking number for like the number of members, because it's always fluctuating, just like the number of student orgs was at UNH. There's always somebody on the way in, somebody on the way out. The talking number had been about 800. Mm-hmm. And when I joined on the staff, we were around 660.
Wow.
And I'm happy to say that our talking number is back up to 750, which is great. And but it's taken 3 years. So in addition to bringing people back, I wanted to bring new people back in, and other people feel that way too. That wasn't just my only idea.
Yeah.
And we've been making these cool partnerships. One was working with Catapult. They, coming out of early pandemic, knew that they needed to do some things, and for some long-term stability, we help them out, and I do their sponsorships, and I do some of that. We help out with advising them, help out with building their network into the other communities.
Yeah.
The other relationships that we've formed in the last couple of years have been in other sort of traditionally underserved spaces. We now have a great thriving relationship with Seacoast Outright, the area's LGBTQ plus organization. They, when I first got to know them as a student at UNH, I knew them as an organization that helped young people on their coming out journey and helping families support them through that, youth basically. And around the same time that we were doing strategic planning, wanting to engage other communities, we got word that they were looking to do things with some of their folks who had now been with that organization so long. They were adults, they were mentors or future mentors, and they wanted to do some networking.
Right.
And thankfully it just worked out that well, you do that and we do that, and let's do this together. So now every other month we alternate a morning versus an evening networking program. And so it's the LGBTQ plus and ally and the allies together networking. We have a similar growing relationship with the Business Alliance for People of Color, BAPOC. They are a statewide organization, but a lot of the leaders are here. And so we've been able to support them. They've supported us, and we've done work together. And other cool organizations like the Women's Business League. Last year, Liz and Jen in our office really spearheaded a program called Celebrate Her, which was an awards series, an awards event plus an education series geared towards the women in our chamber. And so we've really gone out reaching to a lot of communities. And I think we've been very successful doing that. We've certainly gotten a lot of, there was actually a gentleman at our morning mixer with Seacoast Outright, we call it You're Welcome, that actually said, I just got to say something. A Chamber of Commerce and the LGBTQ community together? Where else but Portsmouth are you going to see that?
Right.
I'm sure it's happening other places, and I hope it continues to happen other places. So I think
that's a positive comment.
Yeah, it was. It was great. It was unprompted, and I was like, I wish we were recording that. That would have been awesome. But I think that's the future.
Yeah.
And then I also think continuing to reach out to non-members and former members is important.
Yeah.
To let them know that you care. So, I've talked with a restaurant that is not a member. I've talked to them a couple times over the years. And I'm always like, hey, look, if somebody comes into the visitor center and I don't want to describe it too much, but they say, I'm looking for a restaurant that
Right.
I'm sending them to your restaurant.
Yeah.
Because you're the one that meets those three things. It's not that we're out there actively steering people away. We want to represent this community. There are other things that we can do for you that if you're a member, but we want to raise that tide for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think more and more there's chambers that want to do that too.
Yeah. Well, I love how you framed all that, because even the name of it, right? Like commerce is a word that I feel like has aged well and remains apt and relevant, and just I don't know, like it's not quite the same thing, and we don't have to get into like the definitions of these words, but it's given how human oriented like of an enterprise the Chamber of Commerce is, like it's funny to imagine an alternative world where like the greater chamber of capitalism, or the greater
sure.
chamber of
business,
profit seeking entities,
sure.
And like people, again, like when you get down to it, business is about people and relationships. And so it matters the ways in which we talk about it. And, commerce I've found is a very positive kind of value neutral way to talk about, hey, when people do business and, find ways to solve problems, and people pay in exchange for goods and services and all that, like, as you say, it can lift all tides. It's a non-zero sum thing. When we want, the world works best when people can, buy things and, innovate and have new ideas, and like, but the glue of all that is just people.
Yeah.
And as you said, like, better networks, better connections between all those people, and like the whatever organizations, facilitate those interactions. Like it really actually does go a long way, towards making it healthier. I mean, commerce it's as old as human.
Sure.
It's as old as human. Like people were trading, bartering is another, it's not quite the same thing. That's like chickens for,
well, yeah, but at the same time, I mean, like, we want things to be good for all the participants in something. So sometimes, as a nonprofit, we are often operating on shoestring budgets. So,
right.
so a lot of times I do have to go out there and be like, yeah, hey, like, what can you do for me on this price?
Yeah.
But also, at least we always try to go, what can we do on this price that makes it good for everyone? We want this to be a win. A lot of what we do is trying to drive business in ways that help. Yeah. For example, we are, there's a committee that runs Restaurant Week, but we do a lot of the work in the background. Well, Restaurant Week happens in the shoulder season of tourism. This is a term I didn't know at the time, but if you think of the head as the main tourism season, before, after, shoulder season.
I'm imagining I can only conceive of like a Voltron, like
sure,
the different parts come together.
Yeah. But so, if we proposed, let's do Restaurant Week in July.
Yeah.
No restaurant would want any part of that. They're already going a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
Early November, late March, that is a time where they need business. And,
right.
Buying into a collective ad buy with sponsors and doing something together is a thing that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that we like to be a part of. And then there are times where somebody from the community comes and goes, I've got this great idea. It's essentially Restaurant Week at this time, but like this. And then there are times that we have to go, I get it. As a consumer, that would be totally cool.
Right.
Let me tell you what I know from talking to these communities about how that might be a challenge.
Yeah.
But if it works for you, I bet if you approach them with a very similar idea, but at this time,
right,
that might get somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because it's you can't go out there always proposing things that are just going to keep taking. It's got to be for the betterment. It's
a collectively generative experience.
Yes.
Right. Well, this is a related thing that you've got my mind going. You're a creative guy. You said you've had experience doing different arts and musical things. Like, are there? I mean, the podcast is one obvious example, but like, what parts of being an artist or a creative do you feel like you get to use? Or like, are there parts of like being a musician or doing all these things? Like, how does that come into play in your role?
So, I mean, a long time ago, I got away from being a performing musician, and I ended up I was one of those people that put on the concerts.
Yeah.
Because I had just as much fun doing that, and I was honestly better at those things. And that got me into photography. And then I started getting a little bit more into graphic design. So for a while, I was making a lot of the MUBS advertisements, but that wasn't part of my job.
Yeah.
It was something I got to do as part of it. But through that, I got to build up a little portfolio of things. And I do remember also in my interview, Ben, our president, going, hey, these things in this portfolio here, like, what did you make? And by make, how much did you make? And how much of it is tweaking templates? And like, where are we? I'm like, so I told him, and he goes, that's great, because I do all the design around here, and I'm going to be too busy to, because he had been the vice president, he was becoming president. He's like, okay. And I kind of went, oh, all right, that little nugget might be really helpful in getting me this job. And so now I don't do all of it, because Ben still does some here or there, but it's great because when one of us is really busy, the other one can take over and do it. So, I'm making the posters for Restaurant Week through a lot of our different events. So I still spend a lot of time in Adobe products, which is fun. And then, using the equipment that I have from doing music projects at home is how we got our podcast started.
Right.
If it makes sense eventually for the chamber to invest in its own stuff, they will. But for the time being, we're using mine, because that's how we can get it started. The bigger thing has been knowing people to kind of talk to and who to go to on that. So, for example, we do some big events, and if you've got a committee and they go, oh, I need a band, and they Google an award for band, a band for award show. There's going to be a band out of Boston that's like a general business band that is going to be happy to charge you $8,000 to $10,000 to come play your gala.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's a big dent in the thing that you were there to raise money for. And through this, and also people like the folks at the Music Hall, Portsmouth Music and Arts Center, Prescott Park, et cetera, being involved with us, I can be one of those people to go, you do know in our backyard, we have got some world-class talent. Let's go talk to see who's got a band. And sure enough, we had a killer band play our event at Jimmy's a couple of years ago for a fraction of that, but that was still their full asking rate. Because they had built that band to go after some particular kinds of gigs.
Right.
So everyone won in that situation. I guess except for the general band out of Boston, but I'd like to view that they didn't have to drive up here.
They're not hurting for gigs either.
I think they're fine. But so things like that have certainly been helpful. I still get to stay in touch with some things.
Well, that's a good example. I was going to ask if there are particular examples of either businesses that get involved or people building relationships of you personally getting to see, I don't know, someone have an experience of, oh, this is what a chamber is for, or whoa, now that I'm a part of it, or I went to a thing, I got to make a connection or have an experience. Do you see people have aha moments like that, or you have really great outcomes for businesses or events that go really well or something?
Definitely. Not quite as dramatic. It would be awesome if it was, but
I'm
definitely
sure it's slow. It's the cumulative effect over time. The
cumulative,
is dramatic.
Absolutely. We have people that get started with us very slowly, and then a year later, they're a go-to call for a lot of people, because they either have the product that they need, they have the experience, the know-how, but more importantly, it's having those connections. So very quickly, I have absolutely seen people get plugged in and really take off. There's a gentleman I can think of who's one of our ambassadors that he gets started with the chamber a couple months after I did. He very much wanted a seat on we have these intact networking groups called Connect and Collaborate, but they're one seat per industry. And some of those industries that are really known for networking, they get that seat. They don't let go until they really have to. And this person happened to be in real estate. And they're like, I really would love to have a seat in that, in one of those. I said, well, I'm sorry, it's occupied right now, but stay in touch. You're the next one to get one of those seats. And he, was coming to the networking events, being active, got a seat pretty quickly because it just happened to come up. That worked out. Now that person is an ambassador with us. They run that networking group they wanted to be a part of. They're the chair of it now. They, under their time with another co-leader, have brought that group from about 18 to 30 people. Their experience has really grown, and they are one of the top connectors in our group.
Wow.
So, I can't take any credit for that, but I've watched that happen. And, the other thing that I like to tell people too is if you just join a Chamber of Commerce by filling out the application, sending in your check, and just having your name on the website,
Yeah.
congratulations, you've wasted that investment.
Right.
Like but if you're there, you're talking to people, you're networking, you're being genuine,
Yeah.
and you do it regularly, good things will happen because those connections get made. People get to know you. People get to look forward to interacting with you. And, it might not be that one particular, your biggest thing that you're looking to sell.
Yeah.
But people are going to remember you, and they're going to come to you when that right time happens.
Right.
So there's a lot of that.
Well, even I like that example you gave of the person kind of waiting for the spot and opening up, being a good fit. I bet it's and tell me how wrong this is. I feel like in any kind of social, organization or like a social club, and the Chamber's not exactly a sim, but it's similar enough. Yeah. There's a balance, right, between the prestige of it, and maintaining, okay, if we're going to have a kind of exclusivity and people seek us for that, it's because they think that grants them a higher tier or quality of experience or access or something, right? And I'll give you a morbid example of a family member of mine, all he ever wanted to do was join the yacht club. Okay. He moved to Florida and, it was a whole thing. And, they said to me once that they're so excited, and I'm not poo-pooing yacht clubs.
Sure, sure.
I'm sure they're great, but they were like, yeah, there's a limited number of spots in the yacht club. And I'm like, okay. He's like, and I think a spot's going to open up soon. And I'm like, how does a spot open up? And he's like, well, people, they pass away. And then a new spot opens up and then I can be in the yacht club. And I'm like, geez.
Yep, sure.
That's rough,
That is.
And I'm sure the people in that club, really like it for whatever those reasons are of no, not anyone can join, And, so I'm sure it's an interesting challenge of hey, anyone can join, but how do we have it open to everybody, but also have a really excellent experience for all the people who do join?
So that's a great example. So we have 2 of those networking groups. And in situations like that, sometimes people say, when are you going to have a third?
Right.
And the first thing that we often say is not anytime soon, because we would rather have 2 thriving groups than 3 struggling ones.
Right.
And there's been a couple times in my 3 years, really, actually only one to think of it, where somebody's like, no, look, what do I need to do to get a third one started?
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, let's stay in touch. Let's talk about it. But I think what you would need, I think maybe I came up with the number 7, right?
Yeah.
5 to 7 folks from some of those industries to start a group, but you can't take people from the other 2 groups.
Yeah. Like traffic cop.
Yeah. You can't.
Cop.
Just because we don't want this third group to impact the hard work that people have put into these other ones.
Yeah.
I said, maybe if somebody, it's really a better fit to meet on that day and that sequence felt okay, fine, maybe. But that was the idea. And, sure enough, that's the seat that person was looking opened up in that time frame.
Yeah.
The other thing that's been pretty great, and I've been very impressed about this with our chamber, is our Thursday group, there was a person that had the photographer seat and a person who had the videographer seat. And that's what they talked about in those meetings.
Yeah.
I learned months later, they both did both bits of work, but they had made an agreement that for the purposes of this one hour networking thing a week, this person's the videographer, this person's the photographer.
Yeah.
And they handled it great.
Yeah.
And so often we were able to do that too.
Yeah.
We want to protect that person's investment of their time and energy for a seat. But if there is a way to broaden that network for that whole group, our groups have been very good about finding that.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah. Well, it's the non-zero sum of hey, I'm not, my position here as the photographer or whatever is not threatened by you also swapping in occasionally, right? And us kind of both learning from each other. Mm-hmm. It's collaborative.
There you go.
Wasn't it? That's in the name, isn't it? The collaborative.
The Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth. Yes.
So that kind of makes me think. Well, I want to be mindful of time too.
Sure,
I always like to ask people: Is there anything that you really wanted to talk about that you feel like we haven't covered?
I mean, I think we really did a lot of the things. I think
I just want to give people that opportunity.
No, I appreciate it. I have a similar. I've had similar wrap up questions when I've done these kinds of things too. No, I really wanted to cover things like the importance to us to reaching out to other groups, the importance of us of being open to people. I think it's important that we are a welcoming organization and that we really mean it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want us to just say that we are and then us to not be it. Like, I really do. If somebody has an experience that isn't what we're saying that the experience is, I want to know about it so we can work on that.
Yeah.
And I feel like we get to talk a little bit about that. We get to talk about working with young professional organizations. So no, this was fun.
Great. Well, I have more questions.
Yeah, no, please. Let's do it.
Stick around.
Yeah.
Are there things like the ecosystem of like how big does the web get, right? Like we've talked about, there's the chambers of commerce for this area. There's like the ones over in Monadnock.
Yeah.
Like how do you ever interact with like chambers of commerce, like from other states, or is there like a New England mothership for these things?
Sure. There is, and I don't know the acronyms well enough. This weekend and then next week, Ben is going to the New England Association of Chamber Executives conference.
It's like the Russian dolls.
Kind of.
The Matryoshka dolls.
So, it's largely professional development and networking for the networkers opportunity. It was in Ogunquit last year, so I made the day trip up the 2 days to check it out. So there is that. What I was laughing about, though, is like any industry, there's a Facebook group for is a closed private group for chamber executives.
Yeah.
And just like any online community,
a gossip catalog.
There is that. There's a great place. You can search, because if you've had an idea, chances are somebody else has had it too.
Right.
And chambers, for the most part, are pretty open to sharing their playbooks or their ideas, or like being open to a call. Yeah, call and ask me questions about it. Like, I don't want to write you a 20-page email about it.
Yeah.
But I'll answer your questions for 20 minutes.
Right.
Sure. So there's that. That is handy. And at the same time, you see some dysfunction things out there. Unfortunately, there's a heavy contingent about people complaining about some challenging situations that they're in, and it kind of does make you go, "Ooh, glad I'm not in that one at the moment." But no, we are our own independent organization. We do belong to the State Chamber of Commerce, which is the BIA, the Business Industry Association. And there's some cool things going on there, largely around lobbying space.
Yeah.
That's one of those things actually we didn't mention is we are a 501c6, which the main difference between a 3 and a 6 is we can lobby. Because we're here to advocate.
Right, but I'm glad you brought that up too, because when people hear the word lobbyist, their mind, I think, goes to like deep pocket organizations with bad intentions, and they forget like, no, and conservation organizations can lobby as well, and so can nonprofit.
And our kinds of lobbying, tends to be there's some sort of bill in front of the New Hampshire House, and a lot of people that might have a heavy impact on the greater Portsmouth community, but have next to no impact on everything on the other side of 93, just to pick a spot. And our representatives are from everywhere, and they might not know. So in the best case, lobbying can be educating.
Right.
And then, yes, the worst connotation is exactly what you were saying right there. So
that's more of the 6 mafia Chamber of Commerce families.
It is funny, when I talk to some friends about what I do, there are pretty quick ways to make it sound like a chamber is like that. It's like, I walk into a new business, it's like, it's great business. Shame if it didn't work out. Like,
here's my card if you need protection.
Right. And then it's like, dude, don't be like that.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of the vibe you want to do.
Let me explain to you how things work here.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like, oh God, don't say it like that. But it is true.
Like, you might get hit by a catapult.
You'd hit by a catapult.
It'd be a shame if you got catapulted.
If you knew it was good for you, you'd join. And like, it's all in the tone, really, the way you say it.
Yeah.
Really derailed quickly.
Yeah.
But and then there's the National Chamber of Commerce, which we are not part of that organization. And Yeah, because we're a local organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in your interactions with chambers of commerce in other places in other states, and you may not have a good sense of this, but are there things like I'm asking this? When I was talking to James at the New Hampshire Business Finance Authority, he said, and I believed him. He said we actually do this really well. Like lots of states have BFAs. New Hampshire's functions particularly well. We're seen as a model of success.
Yeah.
And so he's often talking to, folks from other states, and they're like, "What are you doing up there in the Granite State? What are you doing better? How do we help each other?" So like, are there things in your experience that you feel like either your chamber or the broader state, et cetera, that you feel like we do particularly well here, or are there lessons that you learned from other states, like, or maybe doesn't happen?
I mean, there's always lessons to pick up from other places. Like at that conference I went to last year, I picked up an idea. I still haven't had a chance to implement yet, but I think the group was down from Old Saybach, Connecticut, was where that idea came from. And it was, one of their business after hours a year, people who are interested in wanting to meet new people can kind of indicate that with their registration. And then they will be given a dance card of people to talk to.
Yeah.
And they can make some announcements.
A dance card?
Dance card. A dance card is an old thing that like our grandparents may have had. So
I have no idea
literally
what this
it
is,
was a card that they would fill out, like dance number 1, you danced with person X.
Really?
I don't know the full reasons for it. Sometimes it was that like, hey, save me a dance. That's I think a little way to do it.
It's a little intimidating to ask someone to dance. Maybe that's the reason.
It's a thing, but so essentially, that's the throwback to an older social thing. But the idea being, you want to be placed with different people.
Yeah.
Great. We will make it so that, okay, the event is, call it, 5 to 6:30. Starting 15 minutes in, we're going to say, all right, those of you participating in this, go find the first person on your list. And, we're going to have you switch in 10 minutes.
Right.
It's not quite speed dating. It's actually a much slower idea. I think that is neat and has some ideas. One thing that I think we have been told by people who've been members in other places that we are not very cliquey of a community. We were open. We let, people walk up and join the conversation. It's not like they're shunning people. I think we do a good job with that, but there's still ways that we can do it better. Yeah. So there's definitely good ideas from a lot of other places. And other things like, the famous bringing in non-dues revenue. Yeah. You get stuck in doing things the way you've always done it. That was a big joke when I was at UNH. Oh, it's always been this way. You've done it for 2 years. Yeah. But in a place where your population is designed to turn over every 3 to 5 years, right? Of course, you do it twice. People think you've always done it that way. Well, it still happens in the post or outside college world. You need some fresh ideas. So I think it's important to keep things open like that. And then, I do think New Hampshire as a community, and even nearby here, we're border communities with 2 other states here. Right. I think our region does a good job of really wanting to know their neighbors when they're in a networking place, and they want to know what's going on and wishing good things for people. Yes, people do want to win the business, but one of my first events that I went to back in 2021 was we have these regular meetups called Let's Talk Tourism for a tourism community, and that's retailers, restaurants, hotels, etc. And I was blown away in that first meeting where we had folks from the Sheraton here in Portsmouth with the folks from Coleman Hotels who own the AC, the Residence Inn, and the Hampton Inn right there, very openly talking about the numbers of people in a party that are coming through, what states they're coming from, how long they were staying, general itineraries, sharing intel on what was happening in this crucial rebuilding period. Right. And you see that happening, and it's amazing. Another time, one of the things that I helped with was there was a very large state conference that had been up at the Mount Washington for years, and they wanted to do something different. They reached out to, again, it was a connection at the Sheraton, and they're like, we'd love to take this business. That would be great. It's too big for us. Yeah. And the visiting committee came down, and I was part of a group that brought them around from the Sheraton to the music hall to the Call-In Properties, to a few other places, showing how we could be a host community for this conference. And I'm pleased to report that the city won that bid. Wow. And it came down here. And I never would have thought that would have been a thing that would happen, but it does happen. Yeah. So I think we do that very well.
And it's not an accident, right?
No, it was intentional. Like we can't do this one ourselves, but I think together we can do this one.
Right.
So it worked. It was great.
Well, I imagine that, a great chamber of commerce is kind of like, it works best when you don't notice it. Like, it's like, oh, all this, wow, I'm here in the business community. I feel really connected to all the businesses. I feel like we're all, have our each other's best interests at heart. And I see all these people and all these great programming things happen. And I know people, and it's like, and it's all under the, the not devious, the very wholesome, backdrop shadow of a well-functioning chamber of commerce.
But I think also too, we're here to support and to amplify. There's a lot of great things that happen without us. We can just be helpful.
Yeah. Right, you don't need to insert yourself.
No, like, hey. And I think there's definitely times where we intentionally don't insert ourselves. We're like, we can just help this thing. It just needs a little bit of help right here. Great, here it goes.
Yeah.
It's only really when it needs something bigger that we might take it on as an official thing.
Right.
Because if there's ways, because then that allows us to keep focusing on the work that we're doing there. But we just want good things for the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a great. All right, Nate. What makes you optimistic about the future of your work or anything?
It's those developing partnerships that makes it optimistic. People who would absolutely have felt, well, I'm putting judgments on them based on conversation. People who I think would have been marginalized by a chamber of commerce back when I was a kid, heck, even when I was in college, being active participants with us, asking congressional candidates pointed questions in public.
Yeah.
That makes me optimistic. That is cool.
Yeah.
That's really great. Young, new business owners succeeding.
Yeah.
Or trying hard and still keeping with it. That makes me optimistic. And even, legacy, big, well-established places continuing to innovate and get better. Like all the great, the music hall could rest on its laurels,
right,
and do just fine. But they're always reaching for the next thing. I mean, that partnership with UNH is brilliant. Have you heard of this yet?
No.
So they just announced that the music hall will help the university program concerts in the Whittemore Center when it's available.
Oh, that's so cool.
Because back when I was a student, first of all, the Southern New Hampshire University Arena in Manchester hadn't been built yet.
Yeah.
And the WIT used to get more non-university concerts, just arena business.
Yeah.
But, another slightly bigger arena, closer to an airport, closer to highways, not directly on a university campus.
Yeah.
That's an easier place to do business.
Right.
And, there were some independent promoters in the area that are no longer here, et cetera. But, the university needing additional revenue, the music hall being a well-respected, established pillar of the art community around here, and both of those organizations having some overlap, that's a great partnership.
Yeah.
The music hall can now do some programming, and I don't imagine it's going to be very many. They've announced the first concert, which will be the Avett Brothers, which, fun fact, was the last non-university affiliated show that happened there in 2014.
Oh, no kidding.
It's a great symmetry there, but they get to occasionally program in a much larger space to expose their mission to a larger audience, and the university gets to use their resource of being the arena to bring in people with the kind of programming that is not going to give, Chief Dean and his folks as much heartburn as, bringing in an EDM festival or one of those other historically more challenging genres. I think those kind of things make me optimistic.
Well, that actually reminds me, and we got to wrap up here.
Yeah, sure.
But there's a story. I don't know how true this is, but I believe I have a vague memory from our time at UNH that there was an opportunity to book Taylor Swift at UNH before she was like famous, and it was actually within the budget of.
Is
this real? Do you
That's
remember
right.
this?
Yeah. So for those of you,
because I tell this story all the time to people.
An opportunity. I don't know how close it was. Let's be clear on that. But yes, I believe, and I don't know the year, SAFC had given Scope. So for those of you not University of New Hampshire folks, Scope is the Student Committee on Popular Entertainment. They are the student organization that does the large concerts.
Yeah.
And I was one of their advisors for many years. And their area of expertise, because while they have the biggest budget of any student org at UNH, it's not unlimited. They can't,
it's
talking.
Like $50,000 something, right? $30,000.
Oh, it's more than that.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. Like at least there's subsidy.
But it's pretty big. It's not like T Swift.
Right. Like it's not bringing Taylor Swift now.
Yeah.
But they would occasionally get some great gets. Like we did put on Kendrick Lamar in 2013 or 14.
Yeah. Or just last week, they just had Flow Rider.
So, they can get folks that might not be at their peak, but are now accessible again. Right. Or if they bet really well, they can get them on the way up. Yeah. When I was a senior or maybe a grad student, they booked Maroon 5 right as they were blowing up.
Yeah.
They booked them for the Field House. Somebody in the band got like tendonitis or something. They had to delay the tour. By that point, it was the fall, and they moved it to the WIT, and they were like at their peak.
Wow.
Occasionally, you get lucky like that, and then sometimes the opposite. But yes, I don't remember the exact year, but there was an approved, and the other way it works is they get approval to pursue like 5 artists with the understanding that they're only going to bring one because they only have so much money. And in one of those packets, yes, I believe that is true that Taylor Swift was on there. You also can tell people this, that yes, Taylor Swift, before she blew up, played the Portsmouth Gaslight.
Okay.
There is a photo of a very young Taylor Swift on that back deck. Yeah. There's an A-frame sign that they put up in front of the Gaslight sometimes that has a picture of it.
This is the deep New Hampshire mythology that I need.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you for sharing all that. Now I have it on record that I can continue. What I really end up telling people is like I was on the committee that booked Taylor Swift and then something didn't work out. Like that's the version of the story.
Sure, that's fine. You were on a committee that gave another committee approval to make that offer.
That's right.
That's correct.
That's right. I'm going to take that to the bank. All right, Annie, this has been so much fun. You're great. I love all the work you do. Thanks for doing it. You're making the Granite State a better place. You're making the world better. And I got to have you back on.
This is awesome. Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this for our state and our community.
Yeah, it's a joy. Hey there, thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator and host of Granite Goodness, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.